is going to be based on, which is one of our most sacred Hindu texts. This will then lead to discussing the nature of human personality and to try to frame some of the concepts as William presented. I'd like to try to talk together about, what is conflict and how we can define it. And what we'll see in that process is that if we're talking about conflict, we really need to talk about what is happiness and what is our definition of happiness. And then we can go through some of the strategies that are presented in the Vedas for resolution of these conflicts. And the way I've kind of subdivided it is that, there's resolutions and there's preventions, meaning there's no conflict to begin with. And then we'll just summarize to finish. Just to begin, the Vedas are one of the most ancient spiritual scriptures, and it is the philosophical foundation of Hinduism. It's universal in its applications, it's relevant to all people, in all places, at all times, regardless of their caste, creed, religious background. It's evident if one were to study this. There are 4 Vedas, the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Samar Veda, and Atharva Veda. And then these Vedas are kind of divided into 4 segments as well, which they contain chants, rituals, methods of worship, and the best way to describe the Upanishads, which are a portion of that, is declarations of the highest spiritual truths. So the aggregate content of all of these Upanishads from the 4 Vedas we call as Vedanta. And in modern Vedanta, we can consider it to be the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, which is one of our most sacred texts, which is also the essence of the Upanishads, and the Brahma Sutras, which make up modern Vedanta. Vedanta itself can be defined as the knowledge of the truth, or to know the end. It's subjective science. It provides a spiritual guide for conscious living, tools for bringing a happy and fulfilled life, and in 2 words it can be summarized that it inspires us to arise, which is to understand what our true purpose is, and the inner strength, the power that we all have within us, and to awake and to connect with our true divine nature, which we've heard often here this morning. So to touch on the human personality. So what we see and how the topic is presented is through the body, mind, and intellect, we perceive, feel, and think the objects, emotions, and thoughts that are around us. We generally identify on the level of matter, and we're constantly receiving external stimuli through our sense organs. This worldly living really entraps us in this ignorance of our true nature, which the Reverend, as well as the doctor and Spring had explained to us. The body, it perceives things, hot and cold, happiness and sorrow, feelings, right and wrong. And what we can say is that we never really experience the outer world for what it is. It's only as our mind and intellect interpret it. The mind, as presented often in our thought in Vedanta, is considered as a river of thoughts. But that river of thoughts has a quality of thoughts, a quantity, a flow, and a direction. And what has been presented here, and we also say, is that we cannot control the external impulses that come in, but we can control our reactions. And as Sri Krishna tells us in the Bhagavad Gita, the mind is restless, turbulent, strong, and unyielding. It's considered as difficult to subdue as the wind. So what we see here is, as we move from the grosser to subtler, what the presentation is that the real light that illumines all of this is our supreme consciousness. And as we move up, the veil of ignorance that lies between us and that consciousness is presented as vasanas. And vasanas can be really considered as past impressions. There are inherent tendencies that's what make you, me, and how we interact with the world around us. But once we identify with the level of spirit, the body, mind, and intellect, the true self illumines through these equipment. When you are one with the self, you are not tainted by any of the experiences gained by them. You see the divinity in all, which we call Satchitananda, existence, conscious, bliss, which is everywhere, unchanging, the substratum that governs everything. So as we say, our spiritual living and our practices are all to lead us back to that supreme consciousness. You can tell there's a common theme here. So, if we just discuss from an overview, what is conflict? Often we think of it as, should I go one way or the other? Is it real or unreal? The inability to do the right thing, knowing what to do, but not doing it. The path inward sometimes is clear, analysis paralysis. Something inside you is telling you you're off, there's on the wrong path, it doesn't feel right. Procrastination is a often conflict that a lot of people have. There's actually an American comedian who calls himself Swami Beyondananda, the yogi from Muskogee. He's surefire comedy for procrastination. When you feel like procrastinating, just put it off till later. So it's humorous advice, but not that practical for what we're trying to solve here today. And also, I think it's interesting to kind of talk about, if we want to define conflict, it's kind of nice to see what is it when we don't have conflict. When we don't have conflict, thoughts are free-flowing, cheerful, we're efficient, confidence is building, reinforces you're on the right path, answers start to prevent themselves. It feels natural, right? And progression, contentment, peace, and tranquility. So then, what do we define conflict as? So what we can say is that the mind and the intellect are always having conflicting priorities. The demands of the mind versus the demands of the values of the intellect are always at struggle. We're dying for some fish and chips, but our blood pressure is already high. A drawer filled with candies, and I'm a diabetic. Allergic to alcohol and still drinking. We are our own worst enemies. This misalignment, or rather, there is always a decision or a struggle within us between the path of good versus the path of enjoyment. And that misalignment between our thoughts, words, and actions leads to no integrity. As Mahatma Gandhi has said, it is the most important promise never to break is the one that you make to yourself. As we can tell that there's a degradation then. The path of good provides a short-term pain, and path of good provides short-term pain with a long-term gain, whereas the path of enjoyment or instant gratification, we see always provides the short-term gain with a long-term pain. If we then coming down to having no conflict is to be happy. So then what is happiness? Happiness can be said to be a state of mind. We often hear that if the mind is tranquil, we are tranquil, so the mind, so we are tranquil. The Vedas present happiness as a formula where we can see that if the number of desires fulfilled over the number of desires entertained is the formula, and such, the more and more we increase our desire and fulfill our desires, our happiness increases. But to truly, truly be happy is to reduce the number of desires entertained, which also will increase our happiness and lead to true happiness. And then, so the fulfillment of our desires through our sense organs, with the objects, relationships, the world around us, everything that we're doing, our likes, our dislikes, all of that is external. And so we, unfortunately, think that this happiness is external to us, but then if it was, objects, relationships, they would bring happiness all the time to all the people and all places. But we know that this is not true. We know that when we were younger, we liked toys and we like to go to the mall or whatever. Later in life, we want cars. We don't think about hanging around in the streets as much. All of this changes, your values change. It's not the same thing that made you happy today may not make you happy tomorrow. There's also a great story that I remember from Swami Ishwarananda that says it was about a really, really rich man, and he, I guess, had a bit of revelation within himself, and he wanted to give away all of his wealth. And he was totally convinced that it was the source of all of his dishappiness and contentment in life, and that it would bring him happiness to give it away. So he went to a Swamiji and found a Swamiji, and when he went there to give him his bag of money, the Swamiji grabbed the bag of money and ran, and he took off. And this guy started running after him, and he was like, oh my God, I knew this was going to happen, like I should never have done this, and so he was really, really distraught. And so then he came back and thought, I'll find him back where I originally was. And the Swamiji came back and gave him the money, and he was so relieved, and he said, look, you came here to give me your money because you said it would make you happy. But now I've given it back to you, and you're saying it's happy. So which one is it? Where is the happiness? So this conflict that we find is trying to assign that happiness as something external will always be there. So then we can say, is there happiness? And of course there is. We know that there's happiness. And that happiness, we're saying, lies within us internally. And we have to shift that focus to the divine essence within us. Now if we get into the practical side, the resolutions of conflicts as represented by Vedanta starts with what we say is discrimination or vivek. That is understanding the real from the unreal. It is often used as an analogy or a metaphor, or an example in Vedanta about the rope and the snake. In the dark, you see an object and you think of it as a rope. It brings all the fear, the anxiety, everything that it is. But the minute the light goes on and you see it's a rope, all of that goes away. What happened? What was the difference? It's the knowledge, the ignorance has been lifted. When you can see things really for what they are. So we have to practice this discrimination. And then once discrimination is practiced, like for example, if you were doing something you didn't know, and then now you know, then the detachment will come naturally. And then when we say detachment, what we mean is not like to withdraw, but to exist in the world, but to be removed from it, such as they say, actors on the stage. Also, there are 6 mental qualities that one should practice. The control of the mind, which is sama, control of the senses. So sama and dhamma, you control the mind and senses by controlling the inputs and outputs. The cake is in front of me, but I'm not affected by it. I don't need it. The fragrance of the perfume, I smell, but it registers no reaction in me. This then will lead to withdrawal, which we call uparati. This is once again not to be hiding in a cave, but to be withdrawn from the current situation that you're in while still being in it. And then what we also see is that titiksha, or forbearance, is important, which is the ability to endure like the pinpricks of life, the little bumps along the way that will throw you off the path. This too shall pass, as we say. And then we talk about faith or shraddha, and this is not blind faith, but it's being able to examine things for what they truly are and make decisions, and then that would lead to your conviction in the matter. All of this, we say, leads to tranquility and the removal of conflicts and allows you to be efficient in your actions. None of these qualities are even possible, though, however, if you do not have this burning desire for liberation. When we say liberation here, what are we saying? We're really saying it's the liberation from no longer being hijacked by the agitations of the mind, to have your true free will restored, and to be back in your possession. And I would say that one of the interesting things about discrimination, detachment, which are, Guruji says, is the wings by which we can fly, because now you're discerning and you're giving up what is not healthy. Then when we come to the 6 mental qualities, almost anything you want to achieve, almost any goal, whether it be secular or spiritual, requires these things. You need to control your mind, control your senses, make sure you stay on focus. Then you need to maybe take time away from other stuff so you can do things. Then there's going to be little stumbles on the way. Oh, I don't want to take a break. No, you probably shouldn't. And then the tranquility part is really then what will come because you'll put your arms around it. You'll be able to see it from a bird's eye view. So this is all wonderful, and I do see it as very practical in our lives. Furthermore, we also have the strategies linked to conflict resolution, such as truthfulness, which we call satyam, which is the courage of conviction, integrity, and to not make compromises on your values. Non-injury, which we've also heard from everyone else, is very important, which is the free-flowing of forgiveness and compassion, and no mental injury to others, and more importantly, even also important to oneself. Positive thoughts and blessings for all. Finally, in the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 3, Karma Yoga, it also defines that we should perform our daily activities, dedicate our duties every day to a higher ideal, and be detached from the fruits of action. They are not in our control. And then also, we are asked to perform our obligatory and occasional duties, meaning there's things that we all have to do every day that are part of our duties or responsibilities that have to be done. Some are to ourselves, some are to others. There's also some occasional things like we may have to attend someone's birthday or something like that. They're duties, but secondary. So once we do all of that, and also we should not perform those actions that should not be done, which we all know what those are, I don't need to list them. What happens is it doesn't leave you much time for pursuing all of these desires and whimsical things, and what you'll find is over time, when you're taking care of everything you got to do and not doing the things you don't want to do, that the actions that you do perform with the time that you have left become very selected, they're targeted, they're kind of supporting your key things that you want to achieve. So with this conflict resolution, I think it's important then that the next portion, which is what I really wanted to get to, is how do we prevent conflicts from the first place? So as I've presented before, the real truth is not that we're on the matter level of the body, mind, and intellect and hijacked by all of its whimsies and impulsive actions, emotional actions, and then thoughts, even intellectual actions you can have, but they may not be having a right ideal. So the key is to understand who we are, what the universe is, what is our relationship to the universe, and what reality truly is. The body, mind, and intellect, you will find, will be harmonized. And as we said before, you have your free will back now. So the choices you're now making are from one of your personality, your true personality, illumined by the divine principle. You'll find true happiness. Purpose in life is an important thing, to have the clear orientation. Everybody says it, but it's not as complicated as it has to be. It just has to be targeted in the one direction. And during doing this consistent purification of the mind and heart, which we've heard, is it's not the journey, not the destination, but the journey. And steeping yourself in higher ideals, noble intentions, and as we see this time and time again, which is associating with good people and keeping good company. All of this, making conscious choices, living consciously, leads to a conflict-free, conscious living. And in summary, I would just like to close with just reiterating, so what the Vedas has outlined is a clear-fold path to resolving and preventing our inner conflicts. The conflicts are defined by understanding our true human nature, and the motivating factor in all of us is to be happy and to avoid pain. So in the quest for happiness, we mistakenly turn all of our attention to the external impermanent world, and we have to understand that that true happiness lies within us in the changeless substrate. Once that veil of ignorance between who we think we are and what we really are is lifted, and we're on a spiritual path, life path, then we can say we're living to conscious living. The resolution strategies are exercising our discrimination, developing detachment, purifying one's mind on a daily basis, living with these ideals of truthfulness, self-control, non-injury, and by performing our actions diligently and offer to a supreme higher ideal, and to never be concerned with the fruits of one's actions. Once this happens, we are then moving towards the prevention of conflicts in the first place, which is understanding our greater purpose in life, our connectivity to the supreme essence that lies within us and throughout us, and engaging in the world, living noble whilst being detached from it. These focusing on higher ideals and realizing that the only conflict resolution that matters is our connectivity within ourselves. Once again, with this practice, we can achieve our goal of defeating our inner enemies and living a happy, healthy, prosperous life, living limitlessly in a conflict-free, conscious living. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhaskar. It was really a succinct nutshell of Vedanta as applicable to internal conflict resolution. And he also gave us some steps on how to prevent this from even occurring. The second speaker is Mr. Farid Bedi from Baha'i Faith. He has been in St. John's since the 80s, and I see the date is around the same time I came here, for about 40 years. And he works in the management accounting field, and he has been with the Baha'i community in St. John's for a long time, holding administrative positions there as a treasurer and so on. And his talk is on walking the spiritual path in the face of conflict and chaos. Mr. Field.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, good morning again. Sorry for, I don't want to disappoint you with my short CV. It's pretty lean, so I'm just an ordinary person, no degree, nothing. So, a couple of the housekeepings before I start the presentation. First of all, I want to give a big shout out to my better half who helped me to put this presentation together. Although I am delivering it here, but she is part of this presentation as well. And that signifies two principles of the faith: equality between a man and woman, and also unity in diversity. So that brought to our attention so we can do together. The second one, when Nina said that you have to leave all the external conflicts at the door, I was in conflict too. I said, oh my goodness, what did I do? But later on, when I heard the other presenters talking about it, I said, oh, okay, that leads to my presentation, what I'm going to say. So I am now at ease, so I can go forward with it. So.
Sorry to cause you conflict.
He's learning, so that's good. As you can see the title, Walking the Spiritual Path in the Face of the Conflict and Chaos. So, before I start, this is a prayer I want to say. It is a prayer for a spiritual growth. And, oh God, refresh and gladden my spirit, purify my heart, illumine my powers. I lay all my affairs in thy hand. Thou art my guide and my refuge. I will no longer be sorrowful and grieved. I will be a happy and joyful being. Oh God, I will no longer be full of anxiety, nor will I let trouble harass me. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. O God, thou art more friend to me than I am to myself. I dedicate myself to thee, O Lord. So this is the statement from the Universal House of Justice, the governing body of the Baha'i faith in the world. It describes the situation of the world this way: conflict and chaos. With every passing day, we see the condition of the world grow more desperate, its divisions more severe. Escalating tensions between societies and between nations affect people and places in a myriad ways. This demands from every conscious soul a response. Heartfelt concern must prompt sustained effort to build communities that offer hope in place of despair. Unity in diversity in place of conflict. Again, from the Universal House of Justice explains what is happening in this world. The examples. One is racism, one of the most baneful and persistent evils, a major barrier to peace. Racism retards the unfoldment of the boundless potentiality of its victims, corrupts its perpetrators, and blights human progress. Second one is prejudice. Prejudice of every kind, race, class, color, creed, sex, nation, degree of material civilization, everything which enabled people to consider themselves superior to others. Other presenters touch upon this. So how we achieve the world peace? World peace can be founded on an unshakable consciousness of the oneness of humanity. We are presenting here from different faiths, and we are showing we are all one. This is the example of the oneness of humanity. If we can do it here, we can do it everywhere else, which all the human sciences confirm. Recognition of this truth requires abandonment of prejudice. The other one is emancipation of women. Achievement of full equality between the sexes, one of the most important, though less acknowledged, prerequisites of peace. Denial of such equality causes injustice against 1/2 of the world's population, promotes immense harmful attitudes and habits that are carried from family to the workplace and ultimately to international relations. Only as women are welcomed into full partnership in all fields of human endeavor will the moral and psychological climate be created in which international peace can emerge. I'll give you a simple analogy that is given by the son of prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, gives a simple analogy that human being is like two birds with the two wings of the birds. So birds cannot fly with one wing. It's paralyzed. It can't do anything. So it requires two wings to lift, to soar in the sky. So one wing is woman, and the other wing is man. So they need to work together, collaborate, cooperate, and help each other to lift that society to the next level and bring the peace on earth. The well-being of mankind, Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, wrote more than a century ago. Its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. Unity of mankind. Again, I mentioned earlier about unity in diversity, why my wife and I decided to do it together. That shows the Baha'i faith embraces diversity of ethnical origins, of climate, of history, of language and tradition, of thought and habit that differentiates peoples and nations of the world. World unity is the goal towards world unity is the goal towards which the harassed humanity is now striving. A world growing to maturity must recognize the oneness and wholeness of human relations. So these are some examples of what we are experiencing as an external conflict, which equally affects our internal, and we react in such a way that it may not be really productive to the society. So what Baha'i faith, in fact Baha'u'llah, says to do, there are three protagonists. One is individual, one is the community, one is institutions. Each of these actors has different role. They need to practice their own role. So first we start with the individual. What is the responsibility an individual to do? It had been already with several other presenters mentioned about this. And Baha'u'llah clearly stated in his holy writings, recite each day one of the obligatory prayers with pure-hearted devotion. That when we do that, we are communing with God. It is the word of God that we are reciting. Read regularly the sacred scriptures